G'day, Teeth here from pickinglessons.com. Isn't this tune so beautiful? O'Carolan's Draught. Very pretty melody, played at a really comfortable tempo. We're in the key of G, we're in 4/4 time. In a moment, we're going to take a look at part A of this arrangement. But if you head to pickinglessons.com, you're going to grab yourself a copy of the chart that we're working through, and part B of this lesson will be in the member section as well. So pickinglessons.com. Now, this is a great tune for an intermediate picker. Very comfortable tempo, like I mentioned, but we're using the G major scale in this open position and lots of down up picking. So, and it's quite long too. So a beginner could attempt this tune, but because of the amount of notes and the amount of movement, it would be a bit more challenging. So I do think if you're an intermediate picker, this is a great tune to really test you out. Okay, let's have a look at part A nice and slow together. Then we'll break down and just look at some of the techniques that you really need to focus in on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so part A here is 8 measures that we repeat. Really, we're playing in this G major scale position with a little bit of modulation to the key of D at the end of the 8 measures. We'll talk about that in a moment, but basically our G major scale is where we're focusing in. So do make sure you're familiar with that scale. There's plenty of lessons at pickinglessons.com that we do cover that on the mandolin in the beginner section there. Now, in terms of timing, we're in 4/4 time. There are a lot of eighth notes and quarter note rhythms in this section here. So just a reminder that the eighth notes you want to pick with a down up picking action, and our quarter notes will be on the downstroke. So for example, if we have a look at this first few measures with the pickup, all down ups, quarter note, downstrokes on these quarter notes. So our picking hand is going to follow that pulse. So remember, down on the beat, and then down and up when we have 2 eighth notes or a continuing set of eighth notes. In terms of left hand position, is very standard. It is marked in the tablature there. So if you're familiar with the G major scale, you'll be all over this. One of the main things about this melody is its movement. So it does move back and forth as we go. So heading up the scale, back down, big leap. Long notes, let them ring out. So that opening 4 measure passage is all in G. That's all sounding great. Really is just using that open position G major scale. So just watch your picking, watch your finger choice in the left hand, but you'll be okay. That's not too crazy. Let's move on to the second half of this part A. Kick it off in a very similar way, but here we have more movement. And we've actually modulated there on that second half in sort of measure 6. We start moving into the key of D. When that A7 chord comes in, we've got that C sharp note. C sharp and F sharp belong to the key of D. So we've actually changed keys just for this small part of the tune. Overall, the song's in the key of G. But when we modulate, we're just changing keys for a part of the tune or at a point in the tune. So here, as we run through from measure 5, measure 5 is like measure 1, so we're still in the key of G there. It's all nice and straightforward. Measure 6, watch the C sharp. So the C sharp there is the 5th note in measure 6. That's the 4th fret there on string 2. And that C sharp belongs to the A chord or the A7 chord. It also belongs in the key signature of D. And that A7 chord is setting us up for basically to resolve into measure 7 to the D chord. Then we hit the A7 chord again, and then we go back and resolve to the D chord in measure 8. So the end of these 8 measures actually finishes in the key of D. So the A7 is a chord that will set us up for a really strong resolution to the D chord. It's a 5-1 chord change. So from measure 6 to the C sharp And that's really just an A7 arpeggio there. C sharp, E, A, G, over the D chord. A7 again, so that C sharp in the melody, and resolving to the D with this arpeggio. So in this second half and throughout the tune, we do certainly feature some arpeggio patterns in the playing, in the melody. And it moves from the key of G into the key of D in this case. And later in the tune, we tend to just sort of focus more around the key of G. But at this point here, it's really setting us up for an interesting change. So this starting point of G, finish off this half of the tune in D. Then as we move on through to part B, we'll come back into the key of G again. It's a really nice change. You hear it a lot in bluegrass. You don't hear it a lot in Celtic traditional music. O'Carolan was very much influenced by the other Baroque composers, so you can hear that in his playing, even though technically it's kind of classed more as Celtic, but you can certainly hear some other influences in his writing. And this melody, it's really nice. It is really nice. So remembering there, when we hit that sixth measure, that A7 chord sets us up for that key change into D, essentially. But then as we repeat, we're back into key of G. And as we move on, we end up being back in the key of G as well. Okay, so we do repeat that twice. Second ending is going to be slightly different leading us on to part B, but we'll check that out in the next part of this lesson. So pickinlessons.com, you better grab yourself a copy of the chart that we've been working through. Has your pick mark suggestions in there and your left-hand fingering as well. And of course, part B of this lesson in the member section. Pickinlessons.com, I'll see you there.